Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Joan Peck. I'm the Longmont Mayor, the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board Secretary, and a huge RTD FasTracks Northwest Corridor advocate. When I ran for City Council in 2015, my big running platform was I'm going to bring the Northwest Corridor to Longmont and finish it. Well, I've been on council 9 years, with 4 of them as mayor, but we are going to do it. So I am very, very excited and thank all of you for being here. It's really a great pleasure to welcome you all for this exciting and long anticipated milestone in our region's transportation future. And I'm sorry, I do not have this memorized. Whether you're a longtime advocate for rail, a community leader, or someone just beginning to understand the transformative potential of this project and the long political and financial journey it has been. This Mission Impossible event is to educate and celebrate not just progress, but persistence, because that is exactly what we've been. As many of you know, the journey to bring the Northwest Corridor Rail to our county has been years in the making. In fact, it's been 2 decades. 2 decades, 20 years of tireless advocacy to bring us to this point. And while we still have a few miles to go before the first train rolls down that track in 2029, today is a powerful reminder that momentum is on our side and it's growing. At the heart of that momentum is strong leadership. We're honored to be joined by state, county, and local leadership tonight, talking about the path we're taking to deliver the RTD FasTracks project for the people who need it most. Of course, no major infrastructure project happens without political will and bold investment. That's why we're incredibly grateful for the leadership of Governor Polis, who has made this rail line a priority, not just in words, but in action. Under the governor's leadership, the state has committed millions of dollars in funding, catalyzing federal support and unlocking new opportunities for regional partnerships. The governor recognizes that rail isn't just a transportation option, it's an engine for economic growth, environmental sustainability, and equitable access across our communities. This is more than a construction timeline or a ribbon-cutting ceremony waiting to happen. It's a promise. It's a promise to future generations, to underserved regions, and to every resident who deserves reliable modern transportation. By 2029, we won't just have a train, we'll have a start to a connection that changes lives. So I'm very excited to have this educational opportunity to let you know what we've been doing and where we're going to go. With that, I am going to hand it over to our very first presenter, RTD Director of District I, Karen Benker, to guide us through the start of our journey with RTD and the FasTracks Northwest Corridor. So Karen, while she is coming up, I would like to tell you a little bit about her. She previously served 2 terms on the RTD board in the 1990s, representing District M, where she worked hard to build the Southwest Rail Line, now known as the D Line. She now serves District I, which covers Longmont, Broomfield, Lafayette, and Erie. And even though we're here with trains, she also cares a whole lot about buses. This small but mighty, I'm sorry, I got out of here. She worked for many years in the Colorado Governor's Budget Office and was the budget director for the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. She co-founded the Fort Morgan Humane Society. Karen loves dogs. And now serves on the board, writing grants and holding fundraising events. The Humane Society in Fort Morgan has saved over 650 dogs and cats every year. So I'm handing over to you.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you all very much for coming tonight. I know you had quite a few options on what to do with your evening, and thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I also want to thank our mayor, Mayor Joan Peck. She has worked tirelessly to bring rail to Longmont. Her tenacity is unmatched, truly, and you have to just keep at it. So let me start with a quote from Albert Einstein. He says, "It's not that I am so smart, it's just I stay with problems longer." And that's exactly, I think, fits with the Northwest Rail Line. So let me start with a little bit of background. I like to share the story of how it all began, give you a little bit of history, a story. So it's a story rooted in tenacity, grit, persistence, and a bit of restless, relentless pestering, because that's what we constantly have to do. It's been a long time since voters in the RTD region cast their ballots in FasTracks, and just to jog your memory, the historic vote took place November of 2004. So let me start with a quick question here. Who here in this room voted for FasTracks in the year 2004? Oh my. Oh, that's impressive. Oh, thank you. Okay. So since then, however, 20 years ago, the Colorado Front Range has seen tremendous growth. Many of today's residents have moved here since the vote, and a whole new generation of voters that wasn't even old enough to cast a vote are now living in Boulder and Broomfield counties. In fact, that might even apply to our new state senator. So it also applies to several RTD board directors. Some of our directors fall into that category of either not being in Colorado at the time or perhaps being too young to vote on FasTracks. So consequently, some of them do not have the memories of how hard it was to get that tax passed. And they also, some of them, do not have the same feelings that we have here in this room as to how important this rail line is. So let me start with one of my Here's something to contemplate. Over the past 20 years, the communities along the Northwest Rail Line, just for FasTracks, have paid RTD to $625 million, just for FasTracks. That doesn't count the other portion that we pay for bus service. So I will say I'm frustrated. I have a feeling you're frustrated too. That's probably why you're here tonight. So here's a little bit of transit history. The first 5 miles of track were completed in 1994, and it was just running through downtown Denver. The train really didn't go to any real destination, but it was sort of a test. It was the idea to introduce the concept of rail, let people get used to seeing it, riding it, and hopefully ask for more. So the next line to be built was the rail line to Littleton, and it was the first real commuter line that stretched into the suburbs and actually took people to work. But there was a lot of controversy with that particular line item. But one thing that I wanted to point out today is that 25 years ago today, July 14th, 2000, was when we opened that rail line and we cut the ribbon. So it seems a bit fortuitous that we're meeting here today. So the RTD board at that time, which I had served on the board at that time, we thought was ready for more rail. So we ventured to put a tax measure on the 1997 November ballot, and it was called Guide the Ride. Okay. Well, Guide the Ride went down in flames. The measure lost 42% to 58%. And I can show you the next slide here. Even in Boulder County, the county that rarely says no to a tax increase, voted it down even more by 40% no, 60% yes. It was a historic rejection of a tax measure. However, this measure did not include the Northwest Rail Line. So I know how hard it is to get a tax increase passed. I have worked on tax measures before, and it's tough going. And trying to convince taxpayers to open their pocketbooks meets with failure more often than victory. But nevertheless, RTD tries again. So in 2004, FasTracks was put on the ballot, and that included the Northwest Rail Line through Broomfield and Boulder counties. And that passed with flying colors, with 58% of the folks voting yes. But again, to enhance that tax package and create a better chance of passage, the RTD added Northwest Rail through Boulder County. They knew Boulder County voters would pass a tax measure by a large margin, and this time they were right. I should also add that at that time, our Longmont Mary Blue, many of you may have known Mary, was the chair of the RTD board at that time. And of course, she was from Longmont. She also served on Longmont City Council. And she had a lot of influence in adding this new rail line to the FasTracks package. So Boulder County, the tax measure passed this time with 64% voting yes. So if you remember and you take a look at this, it went from 40% yes in 1997 to 64% yes 2004. And then the RTD tax was increased to 1%. At that time, all 31 mayors in the district, chambers, businesses, all supported the measure and very helpful in getting it passed. But I believe it was Boulder County that helped pull this measure over the finish line. And again, Mary Blue from Longmont was one of the main drivers. We owe her thanks. I should also add there are several other influential folks in Longmont that have really been tenacious about this, and the key here is persistence. But Longmont and Boulder County have helped the entire metro region to get their transit lines. And now, finally, it's our turn. So let me show you the RTD map. So when FasTracks was passed, we promised the voters 122 miles of new rail, 18 miles of BRT, which is on US 36, basically, 31 new park and rides, and 21,000 new parking spaces with increased bus service. This particular map, if you take a look at the red, these are the 4 unfinished FasTracks projects that are still pending. So quickly, you'll see the end line. We have 2 more stations we have to add to that. We've got almost 2 miles we have to connect in 5 points, which will connect to the airport rail line. And we still have to build a bridge over C470 so that folks from Highlands Ranch can, to get their station. And then of course, Northwest Rail. And we've got 35 miles we still have to build. So why was Northwest Rail last? Well, it started with the 2008 recession, set RTD back. The decision was made to drop the Northwest line from the FasTracks plan. And I will also tell you there was a lot of politics involved with that decision. But RTD sales tax tanked and costs to build rail increased. They did, however, build 6 miles from Denver to Westminster in 2016. It's called the B line right now. So from Westminster to Longmont, we still have the 35 miles we have to build. Projected ridership models have drawn a lot of attention and criticism. Our rail line has been a target, including an editorial in the Boulder Camera just yesterday. But while the critics debate, traffic on Interstate 25 keeps surging. Our air quality keeps deteriorating. So the facts are clear. We need real transportation alternatives, and we really need them now. So why are we here tonight to talk about rail? Because we want to tell you about what's next, and it's around the corner. So RTD now has several partners bringing revenue to the table. We do want to thank Governor Polis and the state legislature for providing RTD with some additional funding. There's also CDOT, Front Range Passenger Rail, our partners, and we're all coming together to build, we hope, to build this rail line. You'll get more information from some of our other speakers. We still have a few more bridges to cross, but we're moving forward, and there's an excellent chance it's going to happen because per state legislation, we are supposed to have this rail line operating January 1st, 2029. So with that, let me invite my colleague, Lynn Geisinger, RTD director from Boulder, and she will take you from where we are now to the next couple of months and how close we are to accomplishing our goal. Thank you.
So, as Karen has said, our next presenter is Lynn Geisinger, and her bio is she was elected to the RTD Board of Directors in November 2018, representing District O. District O includes the most northwestern portion of the RTD area, including all the Boulder, Jamestown, Louisville, Superior, Lyons, Nederland, and Ward, and portions of Longmont, and unincorporated Boulder County. In managing a business and in financial analysis, she and her business partner with city transportation departments around the country to market and promote their transit, biking, and walking options. Director Geisinger is passionate about helping build strong communities through transportation options that work for people's lives. Director Geisinger.
Thank you, Mayor Peck, and thank you for all your service towards bringing rail. Thank you, Karen Binker, my co-director, who has championed rail on and off the board earlier in the 1990s on the board, and she's come back to help make it a reality. And thanks for putting on this meeting tonight. I think this is great. Let's see. This is an early version of my slideshow. No, it's not the. I have it. Is it possible to change it, or I guess I'll just talk So what I'm going to talk about are really the passenger rail opportunities and in two ways. One is what RTD has been doing in terms of the Northwest Rail and the Northwest Rail Peak Period Study, which really has laid the foundation for a lot of what is happening now. And then the joint service project that we're all working on, as Karen said, it's RTD and CDOT, the Governor's Office, CTIO, and Front Range Passenger Rail. I think the peak period study is in here. Yeah, the peak period study was in 2022, the RTD board funded a peak period study, feasibility study. And I'll talk about it a little bit. The reason it's important now is that as all of the groups move forward, this has formed the basis for a lot of the information that the peak period study looked at the corridor and regulatory requirements, train vehicle options, station options, the range of cost, benefits, ridership, a number of things that are helping move this project forward. The goal of the study was a common set of facts, and we had this study come to the board just in the last few months at the same night that Lisa Kaufman and Diane Barrett brought the joint service plan, and it was interesting because this study looked at, when I say peak period, it's looking at 3 trains in the morning going from Longmont to Denver Union Station and 3 trains in the evening coming back to Longmont. For that amount of service, I think the board felt like it was, the estimated ridership was 1,100 daily boardings, and the estimated cost was $650 million. And I think the board felt like, that's a lot of money and not maybe the return we need to get. So we could hear a sigh of relief among the board when we had the joint service presentation in the same night. At the same time that RTD was doing its study, the Front Range Passenger Rail Commission was changed into a district, a special district by legislation. And the value of that is it was more organized, but it also was allowed to raise money. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I know Chris Nevitt is speaking and Christy Bright is here tonight, so they can take that over. But joint service opportunity basically took those 5 agencies that we talked about and created a plan to bring a hybrid of commuter rail and intercity rail. Intercity rail goes between cities and it doesn't stop as much. So what we're looking at now is 8 stations instead of 10 in Northwest Rail, or 5 for intercity rail. And it's Union Station, Westminster, Broomfield, Louisville, Boulder, Longmont, Loveland, and Fort Collins. The notable elements of joint service that make it really attractive: one operator. We're not anymore looking at various options for creating this solution, but we've come together to talk about one operator, one access agreement with BNSF, and that's one thing that BNSF has insisted upon is that we negotiate as a group and create a single agreement. One route, which is more efficient, and the goal is joint starter service by 2029. The critical piece is this joint delivery and operations, CDOT, RTD, the state, with the governor's office, CTIO, and Front Range Passenger Rail, is to get it started. It's sort of like the central line that Karen referred to as the initial rail. The idea is to get something working. They're also working on mountain rail. If we can get trains running, people using the service and liking the service, then the goal is to expand it and to grow the trains. The joint service timeline, the project timeline, has been coming along as legislation has gone through the House and the Senate. In May of 2024, I don't think this is in here, but let me look. Oh, it is. SB 184 and SB 230 were signed into law. I'm not going to talk about the legislation or the funding because I think others will be addressing those things other than just briefly. The legislation required a March 1 report to be filed with the governor's office and the legislature, and the initial cost estimate, it showed the initial cost estimate, the review of available revenue, and review of the governance models. And it reached the conclusion that there is enough existing revenue and an IGA is the preferred governance model. In other words, an intergovernmental agreement between all of these parties so we can work together. The IGA has been mostly adopted, but it will be fully adopted by the governing boards and the governor's office in June and July. Continuing the next steps, once we get the IGA fully formed, we're forming a joint service executive committee, and Lisa may talk some about that as well. The idea is that the heads of the CEOs or leaders in each of these agencies will be working together to negotiate with BNSF and come up with real numbers. And I think that's a really important piece. We have numbers that are estimates, but I think that it's important that we're coming up with actual numbers from BNSF. They're going to all of these agencies, they're going to RTD and the state and asking for a lot of money. And knowing what those numbers are, I think, could make a big difference. And as we move on, we'll be negotiating the access agreement with BNSF, creating a financial model based off the actual costs from that access agreement, and then going to the boards requesting funds to move it forward. In summer of 2026, they begin procurement of an operator, and in January 2029, we hope to commence service. So hopefully we're moving forward and we'll be starting service in just in the next less than 4 years. Thank you.
So we're going to have a panel now of 3 elected officials. It is going to be Guyleen Castriata, who is the mayor of Broomfield, Ashley Stoltzman, who is the Boulder County Commissioner, and Emily Bear, who is a City of Erie council person. So as they come up, I would like to read a short bio of each of them. Guyleen was first elected mayor of the city and county of Broomfield in November of 2021, after serving 4 years on city council and 2 years as mayor pro tem. By the way, she is the mayor of the city of Broomfield and the county of Broomfield. They are combined in her city. So that's a job that I don't think I would want. But it's difficult. Ashley, before joining the Board of County Commissioners, Ashley served as the Louisville City Council from 2013, first as a council member before being elected mayor in 2019. As Boulder County Commissioner, she's committed to serving the Boulder County community in a way that protects the environment and allows every person the opportunity to thrive. Emily is a council member in the town of Erie, serving in her 2nd term. She's also the chair of the North Area Transit Alliance, which is a public-private partnership advocating for multimodal transportation solutions in the Northern Corridor. Emily serves on the Front Range Passenger Rail and Denver Regional Council of Governments, better known as Dr. COG. So you can see we are all transportation advocates. I am going to ask them a few questions that I'm excited to hear the answers about. So we'll see. I am not going to specifically ask a certain person, but if you would like to answer this, just step right in. Do you have a microphone there? Great, Emily's got it. Is it on?
Hello? Nope.
There
we go.
So, what is your city's perspective of the FasTracks Northwest Corridor? How are they feeling about it?
Do you guys want to start?
I knew Guyleen would want to answer that.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Well, Broomfield was very supportive of the FasTracks project, as you saw, but 2017 came and went, and we still don't have anything to show for it. I guess you could count the Flatiron Flyer. That's what I'm told. That's what we were given, because we don't really get a lot of transit. So it's hard to bring up rail when people don't remember that. I mean, a lot of folks remember what was promised, 55 trains a day, and everybody was willingly ready to support that tax and still has. So as Director Banker pointed out, we have contributed $95 million toward the project. So I think being part of this joint service plan gets people excited, but there's still some skepticism because of under-delivery in the past.
Great, thank you. And I do understand the skepticism, but I liked hearing that you said there was interest and maybe a little excitement. So that makes me feel better. What is whoever wants to answer, what is your vision of transit-oriented development around a rail station? That is a big issue that the state is addressing with our local municipalities all the time. So.
Thanks, Mayor. So my mayor couldn't be here tonight, so I'm filling in, and I was previously served as mayor of Louisville, so I'll answer for Louisville, but certainly have a perspective about all the areas in the county. So during the pandemic, so I got elected mayor in 2019 in the fall, and then boom, global pandemic hits. And one observation that we were able to make in Louisville was that it was very easy to cut bus service for a transit agency and much harder to cut rail service. And so when you think about that and you think about investment, investors are more likely to invest in a place where they feel like there will be continued operation of this public service. So when an investor sees that there's heavy rail line or light rail line, that infrastructure that the government has put in, they feel more confidence in investing in an area. I know the mayor And Councilwoman, we approve lots of plans as elected officials that never come to fruition because they don't get the funding, they can't get the bonding capacity, and they can't actually be built. And so when you have public infrastructure that goes in, it can actually stimulate the private side to add their dollars in. Why am I bringing all this up with the question that was asked? Well, because in Louisville, we made an urban renewal area, and we really, just the promise that we would have a train got a lot of investment in the urban renewal area around the transit station. And the transit still has never come. And so it's just really important because we've lowered the parking minimums, we've increased the height, we have the housing, we have the jobs, all the things that you want to see, and the piece that's missing is the transit. And so really seeing this joint service come together and the opportunity that that presents, will realize the vision that the investors have put in, that the public side has put in to build that infrastructure in the area. So what I see as a vision, Mayor, of transit-oriented development is that you'll see private investment in areas in your community, in areas that the public infrastructure rises to the occasion. So from my perspective, having this joint service plan is really positive because we can see vibrant additions to the community, both on the public and private side.
Thank you. So Emily, I guess this one is for you. Erie is not really on the line of the Northwest Corridor or the Front Range Passenger Rail line. So what does your city, what does your residents feel about it? Will you have access in a municipality that is close enough that they would support this venture?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. That's right. Erie's been kind of carved out of the planning for rail. However, I arrive at all the rail planning tables advocating for our eventual 80,000 residents because we will certainly be excited to access rail once that service is available. And so just ensuring that there's planning in a regional capacity for that many people. And I believe that that's true for a lot of the communities that aren't necessarily right on the rail line. We need to be forward thinking and planning for, transit access to the stations and things like that. So, it's more than just the community right around the stations. It's the communities regionally that'll be accessing rail. So Erie is very supportive, and our residents are really excited to have rail service. So
great, it's good to hear. The one question that I am kind of interested in is because it's been in the RTD dialogue and it is now coming in an FRPR, Front Range Passenger Rails dialogue, is that first and last mile. Even though Erie doesn't have a rail station, and to Broomfield as well, and if the county can chip in, that would be great. To have maybe microtransit or some other rideshare type to get people to a rail station so that they don't have to worry about parking or traffic, etc. Do you see that as a future vision to support rail?
absolutely. I'll take that one if you want to add on, Mayor. So Erie, we are very proud and excited to be launching our own microtransit this fall, following Longmont's lead. And so we have been planning this and working on it with the intention of connecting regionally with Lafayette, with Broomfield, and just to be able to give our residents more access to transit service. And so I think that there's opportunity there also to be able to access other microtransits and work together collaboratively to get our residents where they need to be.
Well, Broomfield is a little bit of a transit desert. There's nothing north of 120th. And we go all the way up to Weld County. The exciting thing for us, I guess, on Highway 7 in Erie is that the bus rapid transit starter service is supposed to start next year. We broke ground on the mobility hub just a couple of months ago. So that's going to be great for the folks up north. And that's been in the works for 10 years. So that's what I kind of noticed, that by the time something's 10 years overdue, it finally gets funded and finally happens. So it's time. Microtransit would require us to create some type of local transit authority, and we would have to ask the voters for money for that. And we haven't had the luck that Boulder has with passing ballot measures. Unfortunately, it's really tough to get people to support anything, and I get that. I mean, you know, our budgets are just getting tighter, so I just don't think the timing is right to ask for that based on polling we've done for other needs. But it is something that, you know, we hope we can do in the future.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't have any more questions for this panel. Thank you very much. And we'll move on. Thank you. It's really important to have the local perspective because they're the ones that are going to be riding this train. So we are now up to joint service overview, and we have Lisa Kaufman, the Senior Strategic Advisor to the Governor, to present that. And while she is coming up to I will read a short bio about this incredible person. Lisa Kaufman was one of Jared Polis's first hires in 2007 for his first bid for Congress, served as Chief of Staff in his congressional office, was the chair of the governor's successful 2018 gubernatorial campaign, chaired his gubernatorial transition committee in 2018, and has served as the governor's chief of staff for the entirety of his first term. Kaufman has been instrumental in shaping the governor's political career and his governorship. As Polis's gubernatorial chief of staff, she led the state through many emergencies, including the COVID-19 pandemic, tragic shootings, and wildfires. I am going to stop there and just say that she has been an incredible leader for both RTD, Front Range Passenger Rail District, CDOT, and all 4 of their divisions, to get all of these different entities together to form this joint IGA, intergovernmental agreement. If we didn't do that, we would have no opportunity to get the Northwest Corridor done. So I think, Lisa?
Do I change the slides or someone else? Okay, I do. Oh, no, perfect. I just want to make sure I know what I'm doing. I want to start off by thanking Mayor Peck and her incredible leadership and Karen Banker for pulling this all together. And I particularly appreciate it that Karen went through some of the polling and the politics of all of this. You know, as the mayor gave a kind overview of my bio, traditionally what happens is the governor sets the vision and I figure out how to make that vision happen, and have played chief strategist on most of his big agenda items like free full day kindergarten and preschool. And so when I stepped down as chief of staff, and he really wanted me to figure out how to get the transportation system into alignment with our climate goals, I thought, oh, I could run a ballot initiative. I know how to do that, and we'll do that. Well, it turns out it's much more complicated because of the unfulfilled promises of FasTracks and the broken promises, that we see deep skepticism in the electorate that the public sector, like the state government or RTD, can actually deliver on a major infrastructure project like passenger rail. And so what was really important when we set out to figure out how to get our transportation sector in alignment with our climate goals was really figuring out how the state becomes an investor with the existing money that voters have already approved to finish these unfinished projects, and to show to the public that we can deliver reliable passenger rail. And what was discussed on the panel with our local leadership is that TOD aspect and how that drives that kind of better land use, permanent investment that can induce ridership. I mean, we're all going to look at ridership. It's all going to say it's not good enough. That's because we have to induce it through a partnership through housing strategy, TOD, and transit and rail. It's really kind of a holistic approach that the state of Colorado needs in order to prevent us from looking like California, where we're just adding 10-lane highways and sprawl. So I'm going to go over kind of the cornerstones of this strategy was to come up with state funding that really wasn't coming back to the voters, particularly of this community, that are already paying for these projects, but for us to have a new source of revenue so that we can be co-investors with the existing sales tax that is already being paid to get the starter service going. So let's see. I don't know how to use a PC, but I'll try. Great. And one thing too, I also want to make sure I call out is to thank Brandon Schaefer, who's here today with us, who really started with pulling together the coalition for 184 with me and helped make this all possible. So let's give a round of applause to Brandon. So as I said, when I started this job in 24, or 23 actually, I looked at what could we do and came up with a couple ideas here on how we create state revenue sources. And so in 2024, we passed a couple key new state revenue bills. The first one was to put a new $3 a day fee on all rental cars that's adjusted for inflation and dedicate this money towards reducing congestion through transit and rail and making sure that those projects demonstrate a benefit for greenhouse gas emission reductions. And so in the first full year of the daily rental car fee, we are projecting $57 million in its first year, but then it grows over time to over $110 million. And in this, the legislature called out prioritizing spending these new funds on Mountain Rail, which is another project that Brandon and I lead on, which is a passenger rail service from Denver to Winter Park on to Steamboat Springs and Craig and Hayden. Joint service, which is the starter service from Denver to Fort Collins through a collaboration with RTD and Front Range Passenger Rail, and increasing busting service. In that Senate Bill 184, it directed RTD, CDOT, and Front Range Passenger Rail to work together to bring service by January 2029 and to find efficiencies in doing that. And the way to find efficiencies and cost savings is through one operator, one access agreement, and having a less of a burden on infrastructure needs to get a starter service going. A second bill that was passed in the same year, which was to put a new fee on oil and gas extraction for the purpose of improving air quality and reducing greenhouse emissions through expanding transit and rail services. And so in the first full year will be budget year 26. It's projected to generate $116 million new dollars for the purpose of transit and rail. And the same bill, not really germane to this, but also a good part of this bill, was a new fee that is dedicated to new public lands and state parks and conservation, and that's going to generate $60 million a year. Even after Senate Bill 230 is fully enacted, we will still have the lowest effective severance tax in the nation. So this is a good new addition, but by no means a panacea for the impacts that oil and gas extraction has on our state. But what was in there was oil and gas fee for the purpose of improving air quality. 70% of this funding is to go to local transit agencies, only for the purpose of new and expanded services. That's really important. This cannot go to the rainy day fund, can't go towards any investments that isn't directly in moving more people and getting them off the roads. There is new reporting requirements for RTD, transparency measures built into this bill, and accountability measures for these dollars. But the lion's share of this money will likely go to RTD. It likely will be over $50 million a year. And then there is a 10% for one-time set aside for transformational grants. And we're looking at how do we increase mobility hubs to provide that interconnectivity. And then there was a 20% set aside for rail projects with a call out for service for the Northern Front Range, which is the route we are discussing, and completion of the N line if these dollars were to be matched with existing RTD sales tax dollars. So as it's already been alluded, part of that process that mandated us to look at joint service was to have a report to the governor and the legislature by March 1st. And the findings of that March 1st report was there is enough existing financial resources for the state and RTD to cover the cost of 3 daily round trips with no new sales tax revenue needed to start this starter service. and that joint service is aiming to maximize resources and infrastructure, and that we are looking at designing the system to be beneficial to the eventual Front Range passenger rail, and do this in the most cost-effective way possible to bring it to market as soon as possible. It also found that if the state contributes 50% of the daily rental car fee and 50% of the new oil and gas fee, that the remaining balance of what we would need to cover 3 daily round trips would be less than if RTD went it alone for its peak rail study just to Longmont. So what that means for the state is RTD could make less of a contribution than if they went it alone, but the state would connect Fort Collins all the way to Denver. And as it's already been discussed, political leadership matters and to be able to secure this new funding. So we foresee that the capital stack for joint service for 3 daily round trips would start off with daily rental car fee, oil and gas production fee, and the FasTracks sales tax that, as Karen and Joan have talked about, that we have already as a region been paying to RTD. I think it's important for our community to keep our eye on the ball, that while a lot of folks will talk about that money as if it's just the FISA account or the FasTracks savings account, actually all unobligated sales tax from FasTracks could be utilized for this service. The FISA account is just a figment of the board's imagination that they created to start saving, which we appreciate, but it's not based off of any projections of how much a project cost to complete all the FasTracks projects. And of course, other revenue sources might be fare box and food and beverage. And then of course, the thing that I think is most important, and I think you're gonna hear from Front Range Passenger Rail, is that nobody wants to stop with just the starter service. 2 or 3 daily round trips is really just the beginning, and it would really have scaled back on the infrastructure around stations and TOD. You know, I think we all would envision wanting mini Union stations up and down this line to create that really bang for our buck with climate goals and livability goals and affordability goals and induce ridership. And so the way we can get beyond this starter service and get to full-blown service that is more reliable, more frequent, is really eventually going back to the voters to increase their investment. But before we do that, at least the governor believes we need to make good on the promise that's have been made, which is why we're focused on starting a starter service with existing resources, bringing the state into the fold as a new investor to finally deliver on this long overdue project, while not asking our voters to contribute more before we've delivered what we already promised. All right, thank you.
So before we get to this slide, I want to again thank Lisa Kaufman. She has just been an incredible partner and driver of this whole project. And without the governor's office, without Lisa and Brandon, I don't know where we would be, to be honest. So thank you again. So this slide is a little premature. I am going to call up Chris Nevitt, who is the chair of our Front Range Passenger Rail District, and he has been an incredible leader as well. I have a short bio from Chris. He was appointed in 2022 by Dr. Cog to the inaugural board of the Front Range Passenger Rail District. He has served as chair since 2024. In his day job, too, Chris is focused on all transit and the economic development and other benefits that come with it, serving as the City of Denver's manager for transit-oriented development. Previously, Chris served 8 years on the Denver City Council and 2 terms as council president. So welcome, Chris.
That works. James Flatham is awesome, so he'll be next. it is not lost on me that after a whole bunch of great presentations and great information from a lot of important people, I am the first dude up here. This place is blessed with some amazing women leaders, and I just want to give a hand. Yeah. Not least Mayor Peck and Director Banker. They're a force to be reckoned with, and together they're a complete dynamic duo. I don't think anything can stop them. But so thank you. It's great to be up here, and it is also not lost on me that driving from downtown Denver up here for this was a pain in the ass, and I sure would like a train. And Front Range Passenger Rail, we're partners in the joint service vision, and as Lisa Kaufman said, the idea here is to figure out what resources we have today, what resources we have banked with RTD to be able to deliver a starter service for Northwest Rail in the short term, inside of 4 years, to really sort of show people what is possible, and that this is the springboard for Front Range Passenger Rail. But Front Range Passenger Rail could just be sitting around waiting for that to happen, but that's not what we want to do. We want to be part of this from the very beginning, and that's because we believe that the starter service isn't just connecting these towns that have been connected by RTD. Really, we're talking about the whole Front Range. Our vision is the Front Range. These are a group of amazing communities from Fort Collins down to Pueblo and Trinidad, all of whom have enormous benefits to offer each other. And right now, our infrastructure and essentially our government has told us there is only one way to get from A to B, and that's to drive. And we don't think that's right. We think there is enormous value to the intercourse between all these communities, and not just here in the Northwest, but all the way from Fort Collins to Pueblo. There's enormous opportunities for education, enormous opportunities for recreation, healthcare, tourism, and we really don't have the kind of interaction between all these Front Range communities that we should have, because the only way to do it is to drive, and that's unpleasant. It's sometimes a white knuckle experience. It's not something you want to do all the time. But if we can deliver something that is smooth, safe, reliable, I think that interaction between all our communities up and down the Front Range becomes much, much easier, much, much more of a choice that people can make. And again, this is about people being offered the freedom of choice, and the benefit from that, I think, will be enormous for all of our communities. And as my bio said, I'm the TOD manager for the city of Denver, and I can tell you that at a smaller scale, all the rail connections have generated enormous economic development, enormous investment, enormous new opportunities for housing, and it's paid off. It's paid off in spades. Our TOD areas are, I think, 5% of our land area, and they represent, these are very round numbers, but 5% of our land area and 85% of our reinvestment, 85% of our development investment. So that's the kind of promise that we're offering here. But hats off to the governor's office, to RTD for embracing the opportunity, for the other entities that are coming together in this partnership for joint service to get this off the ground in what I think is going to be record time. You know, Front Range Passenger Rail, we continue to work on our service development plan for the whole thing between Fort Collins and Pueblo and Trinidad, and we will continue to do that. We are the keepers of that flame, the whole corridor vision. But to get this off the ground in such short order is going to be something that I think we're all going to be proud of, and I think we're going to discover that the appetite from our communities for not just travel here in the Northwest, but throughout the Front Range is enormous. So I'm not going to say a whole lot more. I think there's a whole bunch of more cool women who are going to come up and talk about stuff. Oh no, I've got Mr. Flatham here. We're together here, brother. Okay. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, James, I have to say that you're not going to be up next. I'm missing a slide in this slide deck. I have no idea where it went. Probably like my socks at home. They just disappeared. So we have another panel now of some incredible people that Karen Benker is going to moderate. They are our Senator Katie Wallace, Scott Cook, and Jonathan Singer. So Chris, this is to round out the men. So yeah. Senator Katie Wallace represents Senate District 17, Longmont, Lafayette, and Erie. She was raised in Lafayette and now living in Longmont. Welcome. Senator Wallace is focused on listening to and creating progress for the community where she grew up and that she is still so proud to call home. Senator Wallace's legislative work focuses on affordable housing, the environment, and workers' rights. She's also a proud graduate of our Front Range Community College, so that's great, and CU Boulder. Prior to her election to the Senate, she spent 13 years working on political organizing in her home community and across the state of Colorado. Scott Cook is the CEO of the Longmont Chamber of Commerce, a position he's held for 7 years of 18 years with the organization. Okay, now I got it. You've only been CEO for 7 years. When I was reading it, I thought, oh, that doesn't make sense, John. Under his leadership, the Chamber is focused on business development, expanded events and advocacy, and a full building renovation in 2023 and 2024. Jonathan Singer is the Senior Director of Policy Programs with the Boulder County Chamber of Commerce, the Boulder Chamber of Commerce. In addition to representing over 1,300 businesses in the Boulder area, he also represents Boulder Chamber Transportation Connections, the transportation management organization in Boulder, where he successfully championed programs such as Zero Fare for Better Air, Front Range Rail, and microtransit. So I will turn this over to Karen Benker as the moderator and look forward to the questions and answers.
Okay, folks, we've got a number of questions here. So let's start with our new Senator Katie Wallace. She joined the state Senate rather late in the session this year. She was just recently appointed. So she had some catch up to do, which I was not envious about. I figured that was probably pretty hard. But you almost immediately jumped into RTD discussions, which we appreciate. Okay. So could you talk a little bit about a bill that was passed this year, Senate Bill 161, what that did was set up an RTD Accountability Commission. Could you talk a little bit about why that was set up and how it's set up and what you expect to happen come January?
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Karen and Mayor Peck and everyone for having me and for organizing this. And thank you for such a great turnout. It's so good to see the community investment in this project already. And speaking of, as someone who has been paying taxes for a rail for my entire tax-paying life, I am really looking forward to this project. And I believe that is where, I won't deign to speak for the entire legislature, but I believe that that is where they were coming from with Senate Bill 161 this year. That bill, as others have touched on this already, so I'll just say briefly that it was aligning RTD's goals with the state's emission reduction goals. It was also urging collaboration, as many other bills have done, like the IGA that we are seeing. And then it is also creating a 10-year plan in terms of the finances of RTD and creating a little bit more transparency in there. So all of that is coming with the goal of moving projects like this along and creating a little bit more transparency and accountability to the public.
Do you want to specifically talk about the Accountability Committee and what their charge is?
I am looking forward to the report that they will come out with. There is a report that is due. There's a couple of reports along the way, but a final and capping one will be coming in January of 2026. And their goal is, again, I'll let them speak for their own work, but their goal is to bring a little bit more light to what RTD can do, what it has promised to the voters, and how we can take the steps to solve for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so Mr. Singer. Okay, so Jonathan, you are currently working in Boulder, but I always think of you as a Longmont advocate because you used to be one of our state legislators, and you've been a fantastic state legislator. But now that you're working for the Boulder Chamber, Boulder's a little bit different than Longmont. I don't know if you've noticed or not. But could you talk a little bit about what the Chamber of Commerce in Boulder is doing to spur transit and how it works, and are the employers taking to it, and just your perspective?
Yeah, no, thank you for the introduction, and and thank you for your service as well. And I'm grateful to be called a former legislator. It's better to be a has-been than a never was. So, in all seriousness, let's go back to 1867 for a second. In all seriousness, let's go back to 1867. What was going on? The Transcontinental Railroad, right?
I get it.
And the Transcontinental Railroad was not going through Colorado. It was going through Wyoming, right? And so Jared Polis came out. No. So, no. The Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce was founded for the sole purpose of getting a spur through Denver to ensure its economic vitality, sustainability, and existence. So this is about connectivity. So is Boulder different than Denver, different than Longmont? Sure. But we are connected intellectually. We are connected through commerce. Our families are connected this way. And it is for not just our sustainability, but for our viability that the Boulder Chamber has invested time and effort in merging with the Boulder Transportation Connections team, our transportation management organization, to ensure that the entire Front Range is connected. We have over 65,000 in-commuters almost every day into Boulder. That's a lot of wear and tear on our roads. That's taxpayer dollars that's going to roads. That's us spending a lot of alone time in a place that we probably don't want to be, as single occupancy vehicle. And in terms of equity, we talk about multimodal transportation. That is a term of privilege, in my opinion, because I have the choice of taking a bus, driving my car, using an e-bike, walking. Not every single individual, not every single worker has that opportunity. And so if we want to connect our employees with our employers, which is what our Boulder Chamber Transportation Connection team does, then we need not only investment in rail, but we need investment in transportation infrastructure that allows that workforce to connect with their jobs, especially as the cost of housing goes up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. So, Mr. Cook, you have been serving Longmont businesses for a long time, and you know them well. So can you talk a little bit about what Longmont businesses might want from RTD, from transit, from rail? How can it benefit some of the businesses and employers here in town?
Yeah, well, I'll add on to what Jonathan has said too. We work very closely with the Boulder Chamber and our Northwest Chamber Alliance. And so early on in that alliance, I think it started in 2016, so we've been going at it for about 9 years. The very first issue that we tackled was transportation. We wanted to come together as regional chambers. We wanted to serve our businesses as a region. And so there's a model for these kinds of alliances around the country, but there wasn't one here in Boulder County. And I think the transportation was really important because it really did bring us all together, to your point. I mean, all other issues kind of not fall in line behind that, but work together with transportation, including housing. We know that many people in Longmont work in Boulder. We know that many people live in Boulder and work in Longmont and vice versa. We know that households, dual income households, one will work in another community and then others will work here in Longmont. So I think it's very important for economic vitality in our own community, but then looking at the entire region. We know that we're not going to do this on our own. We know that our employees are coming from all areas of the Front Range. And so transportation was really one of the first things that we tackled together.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go back to Senator Wallace. I may combine two questions for you. One is in the last year's session, and of course you were not there, but I'm sure you followed it pretty closely. What we've previously talked about were two bills that were passed very important to RTD. And that was Senate Bill 230, the oil and gas bill, and Senate Bill 184, which put a $3 fee onto rental cars. Could you talk about these new revenues and what you think the state legislature is expecting for RTD to do with those dollars? And then also the follow-up question would be, tell us, truthfully, what do you think the state legislature thinks about RTD right now?
Okay, I'll start with the first question. So I did do some reading up on these bills specifically for this, and others have spoken to them, so I'm happy to kind of stair-step on them and then answer any questions that we can in follow-up. My understanding of 230 is that, as it was mentioned, it is expanding oil and gas production fees, and directing it towards RTD, which is great because we have ambitious and very necessary carbon and emission reduction goals in Colorado. And these things can work in partnership to make sure that we are expanding public transit, burning oil and gas less, and creating a better environment, as well as building on the interconnectivity that Jonathan talked so eloquently about, and creating more affordability and opportunity for our people. So that was the goal of 230. It also mandates that RTD come up with a plan for the unfinished FasTracks programs. So it is setting out a map, or asking for the set out of a map of how we can complete the programs that we have already promised to the voters. In addition, 184, passed the same year, is really urging collaboration. It's another one of those places where we can ask local governments, CDOT, Front Range Passenger Rail, RTD to all come together. Typically, these things, big transit projects like this, are done in collaboration with one another. We can bring funds together, we can come forward as a community and ask for funds, which is the other part of 184 that's great. It is leveraging these rental car fees in order to grasp federal funds that are here right now. Now is the time when we can grab them. We can't let that opportunity pass, which is why we're helping buy in with RTD and others in that ecosystem, other players, to be able to move forward those projects. So what we're asking from RTD, from others, is certainly collaboration. It's innovation around funding and capitalizing on the moment and the funds that we have available right now to get to that January 1st, 2029 start date.
Okay, so you sort of skirted that last question just a little bit.
I didn't think that you would forget that you asked it, Karen. So I just got to the legislature. I can tell you a little bit about what I heard from community when I was running, which is frustration for projects that have been promised for decades and have not been followed through on. That is hard, certainly not something we want to go back to the voters and ask for more funds so that we can build them a rail that we have already promised. And I think as a result of those promises not being fulfilled, there is a little maybe frustration, maybe a little angst, and certainly some urgency behind the state legislature's goal to push RTD to do this. I would say every person in that room on either side of the aisle is looking for a better life for Coloradans, more affordability, more job opportunities, better housing, better environment. All of us want that equally. We can work with RTD to do it. It's a main key player in how we will do that. And so we look forward to continuing that partnership.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Singer, probably one of the biggest news stories that we've had in a while is the Sundance Movie Festival Film Festival coming to Boulder in just a couple of years, a year and a half. My understanding when I Googled how many of those folks are coming to Boulder, and what Google AI told me was at least 70,000 people are coming into Boulder County in a 10-day period. So, does the Boulder Chamber yet have any plans on how to transport all of these folks to and from the different venues?
Do we ever? And so I'm not going to go back to 1867 on this one, but you know, we are thrilled. We were, you know, so grateful to bring the Sundance Film Festival, not just for the city of Boulder, but really for the region. We are going to need regional cooperation from everywhere from Longmont and Broomfield all the way down to Denver to make this work, and all the way up to Estes Park. So this is going to build interconnectivity in new ways. And I want to think about what happened in Los Angeles and what happened in Salt Lake City when the Olympics came. They built infrastructure, they built rail transportation, light rail, that worked not just for that event, but created a new sustainable transportation model for those communities in that time. This is our Olympic moment. And it's not just about Front Range Rail. The largest investors in the Boulder Chamber, financially speaking, have formed a group called Boulder Together, and one of our major pillars that we just launched is going to be called Boulder Moves. And it's focused on transportation. And this is not just an infomercial, but if you'd like to invest, we're working on it, folks. But we're building out a microtransit project from Gun Barrel to Boulder, and that was already in the works because we realized that we have a huge portion of our workforce living not just in Longmont, but in Gun Barrel, trying to get to Boulder. So each of these components is incredibly critical. And this is, like I said, our Olympic moment to bring this into the forefront. And it's not just about transportation. It's going to be about housing. It's going to be about lodging. It's going to be about food service. And it's going to be about bringing a film industry into our state on a long-term basis, because we will have independent filmmakers showing up, seeing our beautiful community, and not just coming for a couple of months when it's a slow tourist season for this part of our state, but coming year-round to invest their money in our communities.
Okay, thank you. So you're ready.
We're getting ready. No, honestly, no, it is exciting. We are in talks with RTD. We are in talks with private industry to create public-private partnerships, like I said, with our microtransit model that we're building out in Gun Barrel. So this was one of the things that attracted Sundance to come to Colorado. It just wasn't our beautiful scenery. They had that. It wasn't just the fact that we had a more accepting political environment, which we do, but it was also the fact that our community sold this partially on the promise that we would be creating those connectivity options because we already have one of the greatest, busiest airports in Denver. We have ease of ability to get from DIA to Denver. Now, the next step, we're embarking on that.
Okay, thank you. Last question for Scott. You probably are well aware that the city of Longmont has been working for a number of years on developing a very vibrant rail and bus station over actually by the cheese factory, cheese importers. And the vision for the city is to have affordable housing, other kinds of housing, restaurants, entertainment, perhaps maybe even a hotel. There could be many things that go around a rail station of that size. How does the chamber see this as an opportunity? Will they be involved? Do they feel this is good economic development, business opportunities? Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, we've been a part of and in support of that center or that transit center for as long as I can remember. I think as long as I've been at the chamber, and as you mentioned, it's been a while. So we have been in support of that. We're in support of anything usually that is going to allow for businesses to succeed, anything that's going to give space, affordable housing. We've done quite a bit of housing, like I said before, with our Northwest Chamber Alliance. So anything related to that we're going to be in support of. I know also in my notes too, I was reading about, a convention center. We, for a long time, wanted a convention center in Longmont. The chamber specifically would be very pleased to see something like that go in there, any kind of expanded meeting space, space for arts, all kinds of things. I've worked for a couple years now on an effort for Longmont Performing Arts Center, so that would be neat there too.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
We've wanted to have, for years now, we've had a conversation in Longmont about Front Range Community College and a permanent campus for that. So now that I'm adding all of those things up, I don't know if there's space for all of that. I'm thinking it's a pretty tall building now, but there's a lot of things I think that could go into our downtown, and transit would be very important at the center of all that to make all of that happen and make Longmont accessible to students, artists, people coming from the airport, other communities, things like that. So, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sounds pretty exciting, I would say. So do you want to give a hand to our panel speakers? Thank you. And I think James is going to be up next.
Well, that was really very, very interesting panel. I really enjoyed it. Before I bring James up, I want to just kind of piggyback a little bit on what Chris was saying about Front Range Passenger Rail and the Northwest Corridor as a partnership. And the one thing, and the reason I'm saying this is because James is going to show you the future, and I'm going to show you reality. So we are going to get this train in 2029. But the reality is we are not going to have super cool train stations immediately. And just speaking for Longmont, there's no way we can build a train station in 2.5 years. It just takes a whole year just to get design done. So we will have probably in Fort Collins and Loveland, Longmont, we'll have just loading ramps to begin with, just so that we can get this thing off the ground and get it moving and show people that trains are cool. It'll take you where you need to go. So with that, I would like to introduce James Flood. And he is going to show you, he's the co-founder of the grassroots advocacy Greater Denver Transit. He's a passionate supporter of advancing transit and rail in the region and has been highly active in the outreach and promotion of a vision for the Front Range Passenger Rail Project that is fast, frequent, reliable, and accessible. James has brought his own slide presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to him. James?
Top secret part. Terrific. All right, thank you, Mayor Peck. Thank you all for having me tonight. Let me see if we can. Perfect. Terrific. All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is James Flatham. I'm joining you from our advocacy is Greater Denver Transit. As Mayor Peck explained, we are a group of grassroots advocates. We have a cohort of people who really come from all walks of life. We have transit professionals, rail engineers, social activists, a whole gamut of folks who are within the region who deeply care about transportation in the region, who see the opportunities for transit. Tonight, I'm going to be trying to bridge from kind of where we're at right now, targeting a joint service project with the district, the Front Range Passenger Rail District, with CDOT seriously looking at introducing used equipment in order to get the service up and running very quickly, and also kind of bridging beyond that to when we actually do have the budget for new trains, what that could look like. So also just a ground to just meet everybody where everybody's at, right? Because when we talk about trains, it's important to kind of remind ourselves and remind the group kind of what train can mean. So for some folks, you might recall 10 years ago, CDOT did a study, an advanced guideway study that talked about a multi-dozen billion-dollar project to run a maglev train to the mountains. Magnificently cool, radically expensive, probably not going to happen in a taper state. So it's not what we're talking about tonight. Heavy freight trains, really, really powerful, cool machines, very loud. That's the trains I think a lot of folks in Colorado are familiar with. We are talking about something also different from this. Quiet, fast, modern transportation that has delivered value in countries and other states across the world. This is what we are going to be talking about tonight. So I'm showing you a picture of a 80-year-old train that is very beautiful. It was made in the US. This is a memory. There is no US manufacturer that builds passenger rail trains at scale anymore. No passenger cars, locomotives somewhat. But today there really are only 3 companies that make passenger rail equipment at scale. And there's really 2 kinds. So this is kind of train 101. So there are 2 kinds of trains. There's locomotive-hauled trains. It's the traditional idea of you have a prime mover, a vehicle that pulls a set of cars. Now there is also a multiple unit. A multiple unit setup is kind of the global best practice now that's adopted in Europe and Asia. So you don't have just one vehicle that pulls a bunch of cars. You have the power distributed throughout the train. So let's talk about locomotive hauled first, because there's pros and cons, there's trade-offs with all of these. So these are very established in North America. If you travel to another state, almost certainly this is probably the train that you're going to be seeing. It's a locomotive. There's a wide availability of locomotives. This is not the governor in terms of being able to procure equipment. It's overwhelmingly the cars and the coaches that are in short supply. Over the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen advent of these things called cab cars, which are cars that have a cab that the operator can reverse the train and run it in reverse without a complicated maneuver at a station, speeds things up. The problem with these is that they're heavy, so that they take up, first of all, they have more wear on the track, they take longer to accelerate and slow down. And they also are dead space. So if you're operating in a station that's got very short platforms, right, it reduces the amount of revenue carrying seats, right, where you're actually putting butts in seats, hopefully. So pros and cons: availability, established, but can take up space in stations when space is tight. Multiple units. This is in California. Caltrain just rolled out last year. We have several of our GDT members actually worked on this project. So multiple units are the global best practice today in much of the world. There is modern operator cabs on both ends of the train. They can be combined very easily. But when there is a maintenance issue, you have to take the whole thing out of service. You can't just pull the car off that's broken. So longer downtime. And there's only 2 manufacturers that actually make these right now, only one of which we know for sure markets a diesel variant that's already been approved by the FRA. So just it's very limited, and it's also just got operational limitations where kind of there's going to be some perhaps teething that's going to be required in the Western US before these really take off. So train power sources, basic kind of 101 in terms of what powers the trains. Coloradans are most familiar with diesel. What's wonderful about the world we live in now, it's no longer a choice. It's not just a choice about you running a diesel train or using modern electric sources. And there's also now modular trains which are being offered. Right now, if Colorado, let's say, decided that diesel was the only feasible power source that we had for the immediate future, there is a company called Stadler which sells trains that have these power packs. It's this small photo on the far left you can see here, where actually the infrastructure inside it can be switched out, where it could be replaced with batteries for battery multiple unit trains for the train to be powered that way, and also experimental prototypical hydrogen fuel cells as well. So what's really cool right now is that there are options out there for kind of a future-proofed order where we could kind of upgrade ourselves over time as budgets allow. So one of the other important points to make about diesel is that people have an experience with diesel trains about being very loud. So what I'm showing you a video of here, this is down in Fort Worth, Texas. Texas has been kicking Colorado's butt, by the way, in terms of COVID recovery, in terms of ridership. But one of the things I wanted to point out here is just how quiet this train is. This train is it's a Swiss model, but it is diesel powered, running in the US. Listen to how quiet it is. It's no louder than a city bus. Exceedingly modern, exceedingly comfortable, and it's approved by the FRA. So we can actually run these in the US. And they're upgradable. So another kind of point to talk to in terms of what we're talking about with inner city passenger trains that make them very different than what a lot of folks in Colorado or in the Western US would be familiar with, is that these cabins are a lot more comfortable than commuter equipment, and they have to be because the routes are a lot longer. We're talking about, instead of journeys that were designed to be basically sub an hour and a half for commuter journeys, these can last between 1 to 8 hours in length, which means that the amenities have to be different. The seats being more comfortable, power charging, potentially cafe cars. So we're going to dip into all of that in a bit more detail right here about why, no matter who Colorado chooses for our permanent fleet, I think you should all be very excited because these are all just way cooler trains than what we have right now. So starting with the basics in terms of seating configuration. Longer trains mean in the 21st century, people have devices, we need to keep those devices charged. So it's basically a best practice and a standard now that all intercity passenger fleets have power outlets, power charging at every seat, USB ideally, as well as traditional outlets. In addition to that, just a more varied operating options for passengers. So there are tables that are very common for families to enjoy, as well as groups who are traveling, playing games. Airline style seats, still kind of the norm. One of the other cool things about intercity is that you are able to introduce a premium or business class cabin. One of the things this does is, even if it's not something that's within reach of everybody, it's not directed toward everybody, for the folks who can afford it, it can lower the net operating subsidy of a train and make this cheaper to operate in aggregate when done right. So in terms of luggage, this is another key critical factor for Colorado, right? We are going to hopefully have a fleet that's going to be running up to the mountains really soon, which we're all really excited about. So it's going to be a balance of keeping people able to be seated, but also include luggage space for larger bags for weekend trips, which are going to be very common, as well as adequate space for bikes and skis. And this is one of the things that I've been super proud to be a part of. There's a group called Colarail, an advocacy group that has been vital in bringing back the Winter Park Express. They also staff the ski train as well. So it's something that's been phenomenally successful, and I would say it's been an experience that actually delights people, something that gives people a taste of rail, and when people ride it, they love it. And this is something that has created enormously important building blocks that we are going to be building on over the coming years. So in terms of food and beverage, this is another huge opportunity for longer distance journeys for intercity passenger rail. For the American market, we probably think that a staffed cafe bar is going to make a lot of sense, especially if we're going to be selling alcohol. You're going to need a human attendant to be able to do that legally. But in addition to that, just being able to enjoy a coffee in the morning, being able to enjoy a soda or a snack. And a lot of these cars actually often include an area, a really comfortable seating area for people to be able to sit and enjoy, especially if it's like later in the evening, a place that you're kind of comfortable speaking and allowing your fellow travelers to rest. And then finally, I think just in terms of cabin ambience, I think a lot of folks have kind of an experience with a very clinical environment aboard a commuter train. But these intercity passenger trains that are coming out now, really from all three of the major manufacturers, have options for a lot more comfortable mood lighting, accent lighting, just a lot more kind of a dignified space. The seating is designed really to maximize views. This picture was taken, I think I took this. This was in Switzerland. One of the best places to go if you want to feel inspiration for trains. And then finally, it allows for kind of like a customization kind of to build in the Colorado brand. So this is a picture on the far right of a train in Austria. And it's like, I acknowledge kind of a small photo, but you can see that the seats themselves have a design that show a few different layers of mountain ranges. So just something that's phenomenally cool that kind of adds to the brand. Just as a reminder, right, a lot of folks who are going to be riding this train, even though we want support with transit, they're going to be parking their cars, right? So over time, right, making sure that we're providing a vehicle that you feel good about getting out of your personal bubble and into a public bubble, right, making it as nice of a public bubble as we possibly can. Another really critical point is accessibility, right? So we view as advocates that the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, the letter of the law, should be the floor, not the aspiration. And over time, we've been seeing these best practices adopted in other parts of the country and other parts of the world that really creates a really, really strong experience for riders in mobility devices especially. A huge part of this is what we call level boarding or boarding without assistance. This means that when you board a train, if you're in a mobility device, you can press a button and you can board under your own power. You do not need a human attendant to notice you, pay attention to you, and make sure that you're completing your journey. You're able to do this independently with dignity. And this is something that we've seen has made a lot of progress in other states. There are fundamental challenges, though, in applying this in the Western United States. The biggest challenge is platform height. And this is one of those technical things that is so easy to not read up on, and it is a technical specification problem. But in the United States, we have 3 different standards for platform height. And this makes it fantastically annoying when we're looking at equipment and also trying to get details from the equipment manufacturers about what exactly they're going to offer you in terms of platform heights. But basically what you see here is an 8-inch platform. It may even be a little bit less than 8 inches. And the requirement for that is that if you are going to be sharing with freight tracks, the freight companies do not allow you to have a platform that is higher than 8 inches, which means that both low floor and high floor equipment, everything that I've shown you so far, cannot accommodate boarding without assistance directly from that track, which means that some sort of mitigation is required in order to board riders and mobility devices. So in Denver, we have a standard. It's a high floor standard. This is RTD. We at Greater Denver Transit can be very critical of RTD for a lot of things, but one of the things they absolutely got right was the accessibility on their commuter rail system. They bought high floor equipment. They built high floor platforms, which means that riders and mobility devices, whenever they board a commuter rail train, can press a button and they can board without the assistance of any human attendants. This was something that was huge. This was not required at the time. They chose to build dedicated track, which put them on a different path. But one of the other requirements of Denver Union Station that's going to be important for the whole state is that 6 of the 8 tracks at Denver Union Station are high floor, which means that by the time that we're talking about a frequent version of front range passenger rail or any sort of frequent service in the state, it's going to be exceptionally unlikely that we're going to be able to operate low floor equipment out of Denver Union Station. So this is kind of a crucial point for us as we look to kind of the bridge between where we are in the near term with severe financial constraints and limitations that we have to balance, while also planning for a future where we have the resources to deliver a service that's going to be able to grow with the state of Colorado. So low floor, this is in Salt Lake City. So the train that I'm showing you here, this is a Bombardier bi-level. This is the most common form of commuter equipment that you're gonna find west of the Mississippi River. And if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would say that this is probably the most likely option that our state is probably gonna be able to find for an introduction temporary used fleet, just because of how prevalent it is. So low floor platforms are also exceptionally rare. Like I said, this is way higher than 8 inches. This is one of the only stations in the country that actually has level boarding for a low floor vehicle. And these vehicles kind of pay the same penalty operationally as high floor vehicles, because when these serve a station that's an 8-inch platform, you still need the mitigation, which is not true level boarding. You need either a manually placed ramp or you need a mechanically operated lift. So kind of the options here require mitigation or a dedicated station siding, which I'll come back to in just a second. So these they have the same cost and operational penalties with the exception of a few inches of concrete, basically. So for those of you who've ridden the ski train, this will be a familiar photo to you. This is Winter Park Resort. The Amtrak trains here are even lower than 24 inches, and they are quite old now. There has not been a body that has been manufactured to this specification since 2002. So a complex problem for Amtrak to figure out about how they're going to renew their long distance fleet. That RFP has been out. They're having a lot of challenges in getting it filled. But basically in terms of like if you kind of, if the agencies we were talking about are forced to make a decision today, they're really choosing between 51-inch and 24-inch equipment. So if we bought high floor, right, which we as advocates think is going to be the long-term solution for Colorado, given the limitations of Denver Union Station, this is kind of what it looks like if you board from a low floor. There are there's a false floor that drops out. There are these kind of stairs that drop. So able-bodied people can use these, right, but it's still going to require mitigation for ADA passengers. So if we do not build dedicated station sidings that will allow us to have kind of the level boarding on these freight corridors, kind of the mitigation for ADA passengers is probably going to be some sort of high block. And a high block is kind of a setback piece of concrete that has a ramp. And then there's kind of a metal bridge plate that's placed by either the conductor or some member of staff in order for the rider and the device to be able to board the train. So it's going to be a journey, right? It's going to be exceptionally difficult with the financial constraints and the resources that the state has to be able to offer level boarding day one. And that's going to be where it's kind of a journey, right? And making sure that the projects that we're advancing have kind of got the long term in mind as well. So let's talk about stations for a second. So this is in Montrose, Colorado. This is the old Denver and Rio Grande Depot. One of the cool things about the US is with our rail history, we have a lot of these really cool old buildings that are kind of underutilized today. The Front Range Corridor in particular has a couple of them. So if we're talking about kind of imagination for station districts, kind of where we could reignite new developments, walkable neighborhoods and stuff like that, it's really easy to see in some of these places kind of how and what the focal point would be. But there's also really important considerations for, well, what will the platforms look like? What will the facilities look like to complement them? Unfortunately, this is a picture of what kind of the norm is in a lot of the US. This is in Salt Lake City, just north of kind of their main train station. And what you see here is what is, I think a lot of Americans are very used to. You see a very bare bones platform. You see a couple shade structures. You have ticket vending machines, and you have no food options. You have no bathrooms. You have no stores that you can conveniently walk to patronize without a considerable amount of walking. And it's a place that, even if it's well lit at night, given how dead the immediate space around it is, can lead to safety concerns. So this is the norm, and I think this is an area we believe that Colorado can lead. This is another kind of example of an American station. This is in Fort Worth. It's a more recent station. And while it doesn't have good vending options, we wanted to call attention to how it's configured to prioritize transit. One of the things that we see is vital in order to reinforce the habits that are going to make the Front Range Passenger Rail project and Mountain Rail a success is making it so it's not just a one-off kind of tourist experience, but something that people adopt as part of their lives, and that is connecting to transit. So what the station does is immediately after you walk down the stairs or you walk down the ramps, roll down the ramps, there is a bus platform waiting for you immediately. It's hard to see in this picture, but also the buses that are aimed the other way. It's just about kind of a 8-meter gap between kind of the train platform and the buses. And then you see it set back. There's a prioritization with space, where buses are first, bicycles, bike storage is second, and then kind of the taxis, rideshare, and parking is all pushed further back because we're deliberately prioritizing the population of people who are most connected to this transit infrastructure based on their kind of daily activities, daily commutes. So this is not the United States, but I wanted to show kind of what a really good example is of a high-functioning transit station in some place that is not a dense urban environment. So this is in Europe, and what you see here right next to this platform is with your first couple of steps, you immediately see a trash and recycling receptacle, right? This is something that makes it really easy for people to do the right thing, right? If they've got trash, they throw it away. It's very easy for them. And right next to that, there's a kiosk, right? So if you're thirsty, if your train is delayed for whatever reason, or your bus is delayed, you're waiting for a connection, you have a place you can go to get some water, to buy some soda, right? And then immediately beyond it, you've got a bus connection, right? So we really kind of designed this facility to tee up transit connections, making it exceptionally easy for people to connect, and while they're waiting to connect, really be able to pass that time in a way that is very comfortable. And this is something that we think is kind of the gold standard for what sort of the non-urban, either suburban or rural stations could look like if they are planned from the get-go to prioritize the rider experience. So lastly, information. One of the things that is less costly in terms of not needing enormous amounts of infrastructure is information. And this is something where the United States, this isn't just an RTD problem, but the United States has been left in the dust. If you use trains in Japan or Switzerland or Germany, really any European country, not only do you get to see the departures, you see a train number and you see when it's coming, when it's going to depart, but they give you fantastically much more useful information in terms of what platform you're going to be on if there's multiple platforms. They give you not just the destination of where the train is going, but it reminds you of all the other places that are along the line. So this is something just subconsciously, right? If you're using this train as a first timer, sometimes you might have your destination in mind, but maybe the next time you take the train, you're reminded, oh yeah, this also goes to Broomfield. Oh yeah, this also goes to Boulder. Stuff that's really intuitive for us transit nerds, but especially for out-of-towners and stuff like that. It's something that makes a huge difference in lowering the hurdles to making people comfortable using transit. So let's tie it all together. In terms of the intersection of using the financial constraints that we have today, the initial building blocks that are going to be put in place, when we're ready and when we have the funding to build a permanent order of fleet, we at Greater Denver Transit recommend that Colorado should invest in as much as possible a standardized fleet of dual mode trains. We have electric infrastructure, zero emission infrastructure in Denver that the taxpayers paid for. It's going to be really important for us to use this. And with bi-mode equipment, right, these are trains that can run on diesel, they can run on electricity, they can switch seamlessly while in motion. And if we do procure locomotives that pull trains, making sure that the cab cars are an absolute non-negotiable in order to be able to turn trains around quickly. So given the limitations of Denver Union Station, we would urge that the Front Range Passenger Rail District select high-floor equipment to be able to operate frequently with the infrastructure that we have, and especially on the high ridership corridors like Front Range Passenger Rail, making sure that the investment in dedicated station sidings to provide that level boarding, that really, really strong experience for ADA passengers should be something that is an investment that is going to certainly increase costs, but we would argue is so worth it in the long run for the convenience of our neighbors. And then finally, expandability, right, is that we acknowledge that where we're starting from, right, is before we're going to the ballot, there's really important planning work that's being put in place, where initially, right, all we may have, right, is maybe one platform and one track, right? But for the consultants who are working on this, for the planners, to make sure that, you know, in the future, over the next 20, 30, 40 years, that when more funding is available, when hypothetically maybe even the freight rail company might want to sell us the line in the distant future, that the plans and the infrastructure that we lay does not preclude us from adding another track, adding another platform. And this is kind of this incremental approach that's going to build onto something that we're all going to be super psyched about and proud of, you know, 20 to 30 years down the line of being a part of this, of something that is going to be a modern intercity passenger train that we can all be proud of. But what I want to leave you with, and what I hope kind of a key takeaway of all of this is that no matter which vendor we choose, all of these trains are so much more comfortable than what a lot of folks in Colorado and other Americans of the West have experienced. So I hope you're excited. I hope you all support this project, and we cannot wait to see what the future has in store for rail. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you all very much.
And that is what we're working on. So, see if I can pull up mine. So in closing, I want to thank you once again for coming and being part of this discussion. What I have learned throughout many events, when you have an event that is educating people in your district, in your community, in your region, you always have to have an ask. What can you do to help us? So my ask tonight is that in January, well, let me back up a little bit. We're all extremely excited about the IGA and this partnership that we have made. But we have not decided through the IGA where the money is coming from and who is giving how much money. We know where it's coming from, but what does the partnership look like? So my ask is that you contact RTD either by email, phone, or going to a meeting, thanking them for being part of the partnership and telling them that we need to have the money we've invested put into this so that we do not, for the first phase, we do not have to raise taxes because the money is there. So in order for us to get to 2029, we need your help. It's always the same people asking, but if they understand how excited you are and that we're going to go forward, then they would be more apt, I'm sure, to help all of us, including RTD. This helps them as well with their transit visions. So with that, if you have any questions or concerns, you can contact either myself or Karen Binker. And do we have any questions from cards that have been collected? If you've written any questions on cards, hold them up and we will collect them and ask. So we do have a couple of questions This one is, this person asked about the cost and time to get from Longmont to DIA. At this point, the cost would be the cost of a ticket to ride. And we haven't decided yet what that is, but there are conversations about it, and we want to make it affordable for everyone. For the time, I am assuming that it would be under an hour. But again, depending upon what trains we get and how long they're at each station, that all has to be figured out in order for us to put a stake in the ground on how long it would take. What is the consequence if it's not finished in 2029? Tax refund? Ha! Good, great question. Good luck. Everyone who's working on this is committed that it will be running January 1st, 2029. There is no reason at this point that it couldn't be unless outside forces like the tariffs, like any kind of natural disaster that would tear up all our lines would happen, because we're using existing BNSF lines right now. Oh, thank you. Did you hear that? RTD has to go back to the legislature every 6 months if it isn't running and tell them why it isn't running and what the fix is going to be. But now we have the accountability team that is going to be put together to help RTD be more accountable. And we also have a financing structure in place for the first part, the first phase, the northern part, so that no one can say we can't afford it, because they can. Since BNSF has a monopoly, what negotiating leverage do we have? We don't have very much negotiating leverage, if any, because BNSF owns the lines. They belong to them. And they are, our negotiation would probably be on times, how many trips we can make, but that also depends upon freight and so many things. That goes to smarter engineering minds than mine. So. Well, can I address that for a minute? The only reason that they would go back to legislator and how can we redo this governance is if RTD is not performing. It doesn't mean, so they would have to be accountable to the team, to the legislature, to other people. So it is kind of a nuanced term, but I like the accountability term. With the initial operating segment operating diesel on a single track, does this abandon RTD's commitment to build 35 miles of double track with overhead catenary and in something V's to Longmont? Again, in our SDB plan, you saw from James' slides that there are trains that can do both catenary and diesel on tracks. So this probably will be in the discussion of what kind of train sets would we buy, what would work for us, what would work with RTD as well as BNSF. Like I said, That was the vision. That is what we want. The reality is we need to work through all of it. So, I should probably have somebody else in. Well, we got experts in the room. They can answer. Hey, experts, come on up. I didn't hear any reference to value capture tax incentive, tax increment financing by TOD property development. Why? Yes.
Oh, there we go. They turned it on. Thank you.
So this is a mechanism that we're exploring for legislation for this year. It's only actually ever been done once before to use the state sales tax. Usually tax increment financing comes off of the local sales tax. And there are some improvement districts already along the line that are using this mechanism, such Boulder has one. But we're looking at doing it off of the state sales tax for our mobility hubs. So as James pointed out, we don't want just train stations, we want mobility hubs up and down the line. And so we're hopeful that there'll be legislation this year around that.
I'm gonna help spare Joan's voice a little bit here. Thank you, Mayor Peck. A couple more questions here. What is BNSF's opinion of the starter service? Who would like to take that? Thanks, Lisa.
So BNSF has been clear that they would much prefer to have one access agreement, one operator on their line, and that by us doing that, we could drive efficiencies because it will reduce potential conflict with freight operations, and it will be easier for them to administer both their freight business and their passenger rail services on their line. I will say to the question of what leverage do we have, I would say under this current federal administration, very little. I think the current federal administration is very biased towards freight operations over passenger rail. But under the Biden administration, I think we all had some hopes that the Section 209 that empowers Amtrak to have supremacy over over Class 1 railroads for the purposes of intercity passenger rail, not commuter, gave us new leverage in the conversation. And so it's possible that Section 209 could be enforced under a future administration. I don't suspect it will be under the current administration. But that is a big difference of how we can drive efficiencies with joint service being intercity passenger rail versus what RTD can do with only commuter rail, because commuter rail does not enjoy the same federal supremacy that intercity does. And so I do think that when we get to the negotiating table with BNSF, with the political leadership of the state being so serious about this and with it being intercity passenger rail and not commuter, that we can drive a better bargain with BNSF than RTD has ever been able to do.
You might want to keep the mic for the next question. Speaking of federal funding here, is this project possible under the proposed timeline without federal funding? Great question.
Yeah, all of our financial models assume no federal funding right now, and we still have concluded that there is enough existing resources. We are also assuming that the CRISI grant that we got in the fall of 2024, we are still hopeful at this hour that that will remain. And that was a $66 million investment in an additional siding and positive train control and crossing improvements that are needed for freight operations today to improve capacity and safety, but would be beneficial to any passenger rail system on the line. I often say, much to BNSF's chagrin at any public speaking, that none of us should sleep well at night knowing this is dark territory. There is no positive train control on this line, moving all sorts of petrochemicals and hazards through the freight lines. But Congress, in all its wisdom, did not mandate PTC on the line if you're moving petrochemicals and hazards. They only mandated it if you're moving passengers. And so uniquely, this line does not have a basic signaling system that almost every other line in the country has. And so when folks see the ROI of, oh, here's the ridership and here's the cost, they're not factoring in the fact that this line would get a basic safety improvement that it should have today for freight operations.
Sure. Okay.
No follow-up? Okay. Are there plans to build nearby parking or a park and ride next to these stations? Should we park that question or? No? Okay.
Well, I think it was discussed, and I think the mayor did a good job speaking to this. I think that we should expect basic amenities for the starter service. It's a starter service. What we are trying to do is to pull together a capital stack with existing resources to get started on a service that is 20 plus years overdue. But that is the hope that eventually there will be a ballot initiative that gives us the proper amount of resources to build out those amenities that really make this TOD housing and rail vision come to life. But we need to win back the trust of the voters before we go back and ask them for that.
Okay. I'm being told we're at time. Thank you. We have a few more questions here that we'll hold on to and make sure that folks can think about how we want to respond, maybe part of a frequently asked questions type thing going forward. I'll pass it back to Mayor Peck.
Thank you. So I failed to introduce our city council people from Longmont, Councilor Shakita Yarrow and Councilor Matthew Popkin. So again, if you have any more questions, here's where you can, what happened? It disappeared.
Mayor, and we also have
There it is.
Mayor Pro Tem Susie Hidalgo Ferrin.
Oh, Susie Hidalgo Ferring is sitting in the back. Hi, Susie. She's our Mayor Pro Tem. And I saw Councilor Diane Christ was here.
And Sean McCoy were here too. So pretty much almost all of our council was here for this conversation today. And thank you again for coming tonight and staying this late. You all are amazing. Did you learn something new? I'm sorry, May, I'm taking over your
No, go
your
for
gig,
it, Shakita.
Right? Did you all learn something new today?
We're all interchangeable here on council.
So now we know the difference between the future and reality.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much for coming, and hopefully we'll have, remember, we need in January for the funding to come together. So reach out to your RTD board and tell them, thank you very much for the IGA. Now push forward with the funding. Show us the money.